The fluorescent sign of the Black Cat Motel flickered erratically, casting long, jaundiced shadows across the rain-slicked asphalt. It was past midnight, and a furious thunderstorm had chased me off the highway, forcing me to abandon my cross-country road trip for the night. I'm Ben, a freelance graphic designer, always on a tight budget, and this place, despite its dilapidated facade, was the cheapest option for miles. I pulled my worn suitcase from the trunk, the wind tearing at my jacket, and hurried inside. The lobby smelled faintly of stale cigarettes and disappointment. The old woman behind the counter, her face a road map of deep wrinkles, barely looked up from her paperback. "Room 313, she rasped, pushing a tarnished brass key across the counter. "Cash only, no refunds." A knot of unease tightened in my stomach. She hadn't even asked for my ID. And the room number? 313. It felt almost deliberate, a subtle nudge into the uncanny. I was a cynic by nature, a realist, who believed in logical explanations, but the air in the lobby was thick with something I couldn't define. As I took the key, her gaze finally met mine. Her eyes, ancient and clouded, held a profound, unsettling sadness. "Just a word of advice, young man," she murmured, her voice barely audible above the drumming rain. "Whatever you do, don't look too close at the mirror, and whatever you hear, do not disturb." The warning, delivered with a chilling solemnity, clung to me like the dampness that seeped into my clothes. I forced a polite nod, grabbed the key, and fled the oppressive atmosphere of the lobby. The hallway was a dim, sickly yellow, the carpet stained, the air heavy and still. Each step echoed, amplified by the pervasive silence. Room 313 was at the very end, tucked away in a corner, its door marked by peeling paint and a faint, almost invisible scratch mark near the handle. It felt like the perfect place for a cheap, anonymous night's sleep. My past, a series of overlooked chances and financial struggles, had made me wary of anything that seemed too good to be true. This motel was too cheap, the clerk too strange, but I pushed the feeling down. I just needed a bed for the night. I fumbled with the key, the brass cold against my trembling fingers, and pushed open the door. The room was small, sparse, and smelled faintly of dust and something metallic, like old pennies. A single dingy lamp illuminated a narrow bed, a chipped nightstand, and a heavy, ornate dresser. And above the dresser, dominating the room, was a large, unframed mirror. Its surface was old, tarnished with age spots, and seemed to swallow the meager light. It wasn't just a mirror. It felt like a window, black and fathomless. I threw my bag on the bed, trying to ignore the unsettling presence of the mirror. I checked the bathroom. Equally grim. The tap dripped, a slow, rhythmic plink, plink, plink that seemed to count out the seconds of my unease. I washed my face, splashed cold water on my neck, trying to shake off the strange feeling. As I looked up, my reflection in the small bathroom mirror seemed distorted, my eyes wide, my skin unnaturally pale. I blinked, and it was gone. Just a trick of the dim lighting, I told myself. Back in the main room, I tried to relax, but a new sound began. A faint, almost imperceptible tapping. It was soft, rhythmic, like a fingernail gently tapping against wood. My head snapped up. It was coming from the dresser, from inside the mirror. My blood ran cold, a wave of pure, unadulterated dread washing over me. I knew, with a horrifying certainty that chilled me to my very bones, that if I didn't leave this room now, if I allowed that sound to continue, my nightmare would truly begin. The warning from the clerk echoed in my mind. Whatever you hear, do not disturb. But it was already too late. Something was already knocking. My My body was rigid, every muscle tense, my gaze fixed on the antique mirror above the dresser. The faint, rhythmic tapping continued, a chilling counterpoint to the drumming rain outside. It wasn't loud, but it was relentless, a delicate insistence that seemed to vibrate through the very air of the room. The metallic scent, like old pennies, grew stronger, mixed with something else now. A faint, sweet smell, like damp earth after a long rain, but with an underlying sharpness like ozone. My heart hammered against my ribs, each beat a painful thud against the suffocating silence of the room. This wasn't just a loose pane of glass or a settling house. This was a deliberate communication from within. I finally managed to move, slowly, agonizingly, pulling myself upright from the edge of the bed. My eyes never left the mirror. Its tarnished surface seemed to writhe, absorbing the meager light from the single lamp. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to smash the thing, to call for help. But a chilling fascination, born of sheer terror and a lifetime of ignoring subtle warnings, held me captive. My fear wasn't just for my physical safety, but for the erosion of my logical, ordered reality. My past, a messy tapestry of missed opportunities and a tendency to overlook details, felt like it was unraveling. I had always dismissed anything supernatural, a pragmatist who believed only in what I could see and touch. But ever since the move, a deep unease had settled in. I remembered the strange, fragmented news reports I'd vaguely heard about this stretch of highway, whispers of travelers vanishing, of strange occurrences at roadside motels. I'd always blamed cheap thrills and sensationalism. Now the memory felt ominously prophetic. My fear wasn't just for my current predicament, but for the insidious realization that I had walked into something I should have known to avoid. Subtle oddities began to punctuate the silent room. The old analog alarm clock on the nightstand, which I hadn't touched, began to twitch. Its hands spun backward, then forward, settling on random times before abruptly stopping at precisely 3:13 a.m. Then it started ticking again. Coincidence? Or was time itself warping around this impossible phenomenon? My own reflection in the mirror as I slowly approached it seemed unnervingly pale, my eyes wide, almost black, and behind my image, faint, swirling shadows seemed to dance at the edges of the reflection, glimpses of movement that weren't there in the actual room. I remembered the motel clerk's eyes, ancient and sad. She hadn't warned me about room 313 specifically, but about the mirror. There was no one else in the motel, or at least no one I could hear. The only sound was the relentless rain outside and the terrifying rhythmic tapping from within the mirror. The tension in the room was a palpable thing, a taut wire stretched between me and the gleaming glass. The air grew colder, the hair on my arms standing on end. I felt an unseen presence, something vast and ancient, pressing in on me from the other side of the reflection. The metallic scent intensified, growing sickly sweet. As I took another hesitant step towards the dresser, the tapping from the mirror intensified, growing louder, more urgent. Rap, rap, rap. 3 distinct knocks. It was no longer a gentle tap, it was a desperate plea, or perhaps a demand. And then from deep within the mirror, I heard it. A faint, almost imperceptible whisper, dry and brittle, like old paper rustling. It was a multitude of voices, overlapping, indistinct, yet all coalescing around a single chilling phrase. They were chanting, a low guttural murmur that vibrated through the floorboards, through my very bones. And though the words were fragmented, I could make out something terrifyingly clear. join us, become us. My blood ran cold. The warnings, the disappearances, the strange looks, it all clicked into place with horrifying clarity. I was trapped, a fly caught in a monstrous web, and the entity on the other side of the mirror was just beginning to stir. The chanting from within the mirror intensified, a cacophony of dry, brittle whispers that seemed to tear at the very fabric of the silence. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drum against the chilling rhythm of the unseen. My body was rigid, paralyzed by a mixture of terror and an insatiable morbid curiosity. The air in the room grew heavy, cloying with that sickly, sweet, metallic scent like damp earth and old blood. My eyes were fixed on the mirror, its tarnished surface now seeming to pulse with a faint internal light, reflecting nothing but the deepening blackness within. Suddenly, the rhythmic tapping from inside the mirror ceased. A profound, unnerving silence descended, more terrifying than any sound. And then, with a slow, agonizing groan that seemed to come from the very depths of the room, the mirror began to ripple. Not like water, but like thick, viscous oil. The surface swirled, distorting my own terrified reflection into a grotesque parody of fear. The room itself seemed to waver, the furniture subtly blurring, the walls appearing to breathe. My perception of reality stretched thin, threatening to snap. And then, from the swirling depths of the mirror, something began to emerge. Not a hand, not a limb, but a formless, shifting mass of shadow, like a tear in the fabric of reality. It pushed outwards, slowly at first, then with increasing speed, distorting the glass, pushing it inwards, as if the mirror were no longer a flat surface but a malleable membrane. It was a pulsating darkness like smoke given form, but denser, more solid, filled with an ancient predatory hunger. My mind reeled. This wasn't a ghost. This wasn't a person. This was something else entirely, something formless, something that transcended physical reality, yet was terrifyingly present. Within its amorphous shape, faint, glowing points of light appeared. Not eyes, not exactly, but clusters of pinpricks, like dying embers that pulsed with a malevolent, ancient awareness. And as the shadowy mass pushed further into the room, I heard it again. A low, guttural moan, long and drawn out, a sound of immense suffering and despair, joining the chorus of whispers. The room began to plunge into an unnatural darkness, as if the entity itself was sucking the light from the air. The faint lamp on the nightstand flickered, then died completely, leaving me in absolute, suffocating blackness. Only the glowing pinpricks within the emerging mass illuminated the horror unfolding before me. I could feel its presence, cold and ancient, pressing in from all sides. Was this a curse? Madness? A ghost? Or something far more ancient? Something that played with the very fabric of reality and memory? Through the agonizing moans and the chilling whispers, I heard a new sound, closer now, emanating from the shadowy mass itself. A wet, sickening squelch, like something soft and yielding being torn, and then a voice clearer than any whisper, dry and brittle yet undeniably human, echoed through the suffocating darkness. Finally, fresh air. It was a man's voice, raspy and old, full of a terrifying, starved relief. The shadowy mass pulsed forward, extending a single, elongated tendril, tipped with a cluster of those glowing pinpricks. It reached out, not for me, but for my reflection in the now distorted mirror. And as it touched the image, my reflection rippled violently, then began to stretch, to distort, its features elongating, pulling away from my actual form, becoming a separate entity, gaunt and twisted. The reflection's eyes, my eyes, widened, filled with an ancient, predatory hunger. A horrifying realization dawned on me, colder than the deepest well. The mirror wasn't a portal, it was a prison. And the knocking hadn't been from inside the mirror. It had been from inside my reflection. And the things I'd seen in the previous guests' reflections, the ones who had disappeared without a trace, were not them. They were the empty shells, the vacated forms. And as a final, soul-shattering shriek tore through the air, emanating from my stretching reflection, I felt an excruciating pull, a sudden, violent, wrenching sensation deep within my own chest, as if my very soul was being tugged, ripped from my body. The shadowy mass swelled, engulfing my reflection, fusing with it, taking its place within the mirror. My physical body slumped to the floor, my vision blurring. The last thing I saw before darkness consumed me was the motel room, now bathed in the eerie, pulsating glow of the mirrored entity, its single, large, unblinking eye staring directly at me from within the glass. My nightmare was far from over. It had just begun. The darkness that consumed me was absolute, a void more profound than any sleep. There was no pain, no sound, just an endless, terrifying emptiness. My mind, however, was still screaming, replaying the last horrifying image, the monolithic eye in the mirror, the agonizing, wrenching sensation in my chest, and the chilling realization that my reflection had become a vessel for something unspeakable. When consciousness finally flickered back, it was not with relief, but with a new, insidious terror. I lay on the cold, grimy tile of room 313. The single, dingy lamp in the room was back on, casting its weak, yellow glow, revealing the ordinary, dilapidated furnishings. The mirror above the dresser, however, was still shrouded in an unnatural darkness, its surface a black, unreflecting void. There was no shattered glass, no visible signs of the monstrous mass that had emerged. It seemed perfectly intact, pristine, yet the air in the room was thick with that metallic, sickly sweet scent, and an undeniable coldness radiated from the mirror. There was no peaceful resolution, only a terrifying, unsettling quiet. My body ached, a deep, bone-weary exhaustion settling into my limbs. I tried to stand, but my legs buckled. My muscles felt like lead. As I struggled to push myself up, my gaze fell upon my hands. They were pale, translucent, almost ethereal. A profound sense of unease settled over me, a pervasive dread that was different from the sharp, immediate fear of moments before. This was a deeper, more insidious horror, one that gnawed at the edges of my sanity. I felt exposed, vulnerable, as if the very air of room 313 could no longer sustain me. I stumbled into the bathroom, drawn by an inexplicable pull, and flicked on the light. The small mirror above the sink was grimy, speckled with age spots. I braced myself, then slowly lifted my head, my eyes locking on my reflection. It was me, but it wasn't. My eyes were wider, darker, filled with a profound emptiness, like two black holes. My skin was ashen, my lips tinged with an unnerving blue, and behind my image, faint, swirling shadows seemed to writhe like currents in dark water. My reflection blinked, slowly, languidly. I didn't. A chilling realization dawned on me, cold and unforgiving. The previous guests hadn't disappeared. They had been taken, their bodies left behind, empty vessels, while their true selves were trapped, subsumed. The mirror wasn't a portal. It was a collector. It didn't just show reflections, it stole them. And now, it had stolen mine. I was no longer in control of my own body. I was a passenger, watching as my new self stared back with ancient, hungry eyes. The lingering impact of this revelation was profound. The paranoia that had always simmered beneath the surface of my life flared into a full-blown inferno. Every reflective surface became a source of dread. The polished surface of the nightstand, the dark glass of the TV screen, even the shiny chrome of the faucet, each offered a fleeting glimpse of the stranger inhabiting my form. Their eyes too wide, too hollow. I could feel its presence inside me, a cold, vast emptiness, occasionally punctuated by a strange, overwhelming hunger for, connection, recognition, or simply another soul to add to its collection. My world, once predictable if lonely, was now a constant landscape of dread. I found myself drawn to the main mirror in the room, compelled to stare into its inky depths. It no longer showed my reflection. It showed nothing. A black, impenetrable void. And from that void, occasionally, I would hear it. A faint, almost imperceptible scratching, like fingernails against glass, beckoning. The ultimate twist revealed itself as I glanced at the motel room door. On the outside, affixed firmly, was a small, crudely handwritten sign. It read, "Room 313, do not disturb." I hadn't noticed it on my way in. A warning, yes, but also a command. The old woman at the counter, her sad, knowing eyes, she hadn't been warning me away. She had been confirming my fate. My immediate story in room 313 had ended, but the resolution was a twisted, unending torment. I had survived, but I was not whole. I was merely a puppet, a shell for something ancient and hungry, forever bound to the mirrored darkness of room 313. The coldness is constant now, an internal chill that permeates my very being. I move through the world, performing the motions of life, but I am no longer truly here. My experience in room 313 taught me a horrifying truth. Some reflections are not your own, and some rooms, once entered, are never truly left. My fear of being overlooked, of being forgotten, had become a grotesque reality. The trauma of my past, my perpetual search for a cheap way out, had made me the perfect target for the entity in the mirror. It didn't just take my reflection, it took my essence, leaving behind a hollow echo. My survival feels less like a triumph and more like a permanent state of being undisturbed, a silent prisoner in my own form. I am still in room 313. I cannot leave. Or rather, my body cannot leave. It sits in the dusty chair, or lies on the creaking bed, its eyes fixed on the dark, unreflecting mirror. I see the other occupants now, the ones who disappeared. They sit in the lobby or walk the deserted hallways, their movements slow, their eyes empty. They are the shells, waiting for the next traveler. The old woman at the front desk, her eyes like clouded glass, sometimes glances at me. She knows. She's been here for a long time. Too long. She's one of them, a gatekeeper, a lure. And sometimes when the motel is quiet and the storm outside has died down, I hear it. A faint, almost imperceptible tapping. It comes from within the mirror. Tap, tap, tap. 3 distinct knocks. And as I listen, a deep, overwhelming hunger stirs within me. It's not my hunger. It's their hunger. I know what they want. They want another reflection to steal, another body to inhabit, another soul to add to their silent collection. And the next time a tired traveler pulls off the highway, seeking a cheap room for the night, they will come to the front desk, and I, in this borrowed form, will be there. My eyes will be wide and empty, and I will push a tarnished brass key across the counter. Room 313, I will rasp, my voice dry and brittle, almost like paper rustling. Cash only, no refunds. And as they take the key, I will gaze into their eyes, and a profound, ancient hunger will stir within me. And I will say, in a voice that is not quite my own, but is perfectly clear, a whisper that lingers long after they walk away: whatever you do, do not disturb, because the mirror is always hungry, and room 313 is always waiting.